And my special guest this evening is Richard Sauder. And Richard Sauder is a native Virginian with an abiding interest in Forteana, unusual information, and anomalous paradigm-busting data of all varieties. Beginning in early childhood, he has experienced first-hand contact with a variety of paranormal phenomena that has left him a bit puzzled, flummoxed, and thoroughly persuaded that there is much more to the Earth and to human perception and consciousness than the mainstream American culture believe. Some of Richard's favorite research and reading interests are underground and underwater bases and tunnels, electronic mind control, freedom technology, UFOs, human prehistory and remote antiquity, international politics, the Kundalini energy, and alternative thought patterns. His books are linked to Hidden in Plain Sight, Beyond the X-Files. Another one is Underwater and Underground Bases, Surprising Facts the Government Does Not Want You to Know, and Underground Bases and Tunnels, What is the Government Trying to Hide? And he also has a blog spot. It's eventhorizon.chronicle.blogspot.com. And it is with great pleasure that we welcome Richard to the show this evening. Hi, Richard.
Thank you, Solaris. I'm happy to be with you and your listeners.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you on tonight. It's always very informative and enlightening to have you here. So thanks for joining us. And what's on your mind tonight? What would you like to cover?
Well, we are at the proverbial crossroads on this planet as a collective of human beings, several billion strong, and the world situation is very dicey. There are a couple of, actually a number of different factors that we individually and as a species must deal with, because if we do not deal with these factors will deal with us, and we will be no more. Our species will go extinct on this planet. So we don't have the luxury of doing nothing. And whatever we do, it must be the right thing, or the right series of things, or a series of things that is right enough, or we will be right out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. Well, a lot of it has to do with the programming of mankind, I would suspect, and the corruption.
Well, programming of mankind and womankind, and now we've got other kinds, it appears. So if we don't begin to self-program in a positive, intelligent, self-directed way and overwrite or rewrite the very dysfunctional programming that is leading us down the garden path to total ruination and perdition, then we are done for, and it's just that simple. Let's take one example, the ongoing nuclear crisis at Fukushima in Japan, and not only in Japan, but actually all over the world, because the many-headed hydra of the nuclear industry is all over the place, mostly, but not only, in the Northern Hemisphere. We have nuclear power plants, spent nuclear fuel pools associated with the vast majority of those nuclear power plants. We have abandoned and not abandoned uranium mines and uranium mills. We have nuclear weapons research and development facilities. And in recent decades, there's been quite a bit of so-called depleted uranium munitions that have been shut off in war zones by the United States and its NATO allies in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, the Balkans, and southeastern Europe. And when you shoot these munitions off, uranium, which is a very dense metal, will burn. So when, for example, an A-10 Warthog tank buster aircraft fires its cannon at armored vehicles in a war zone, and the ammunition that it's firing happens to be very heavy nuclear-tipped ammo, when those nuclear-tipped projectiles slam into the heavy armor of a tank, for example, they vaporize very explosively and punch a hole through the armor. But in the process of vaporizing, tons, literally, of depleted uranium dust are released to the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And this radioactive dust blows around in the air. It gets in the water. It gets into rivers and lakes, into rainfall, gets into the soil, and then it gets taken up from the soil into plants. People eat the plants. Let's say the plants in question are wheat plants. Then people eat the wheat. The wheat gets made into bread, etc.
Mm-hmm.
People eat the bread, and the radioactivity gets in their bodies, including in their gonads. And then you have women in war zones giving these birth to these freakishly deformed and malformed, genetically mutated babies, the vast majority of which have no chance of survival, and their deformations and mutations are horrific. They're ghastly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going on now in regions like Iraq, Afghanistan, the Balkans, and wherever this very poisonous ammunition has been sprayed around by the American and NATO war machines. And this stuff does not go away. It lingers in the environment for thousands and thousands of years. So what we're faced with, from not only from the depleted uranium munitions situation, but also the question of disposing of nuclear waste from nuclear power plants and from military nuclear weapons programs, and also from the exploded and melted down nuclear power reactors at Chernobyl in the Ukraine, and also now there are three more at Daiichi Fukushima in Japan. This planet is being radioactively irradiated. It is being sterilized. And Solaris, at this point, the Pacific Ocean is being flat out killed. I'm speaking of the marine ecology, everything from zooplankton and phytoplankton all the way up the marine food chain to sardines and anchovies, to squids, octopuses, clams, oysters, starfish, sea urchins, sand dollars, pelicans, herring, salmon, uh, whales, dolphins, walruses, sea lions, everything is dying off. It's being killed. What this radioactivity does is severely compromise the immunological systems of all biological life. In this case, so far the northern Pacific Ocean is taking the brunt of the radioactive contamination that continues to spew from the exploded nuclear power plants at Fukushima by the hundreds of tons every day. This waste, most of it liquid waste, is being disposed of directly to the Pacific Ocean, and this radioactivity concentrates in the food chain in the Pacific Ocean as it moves up. It bioconcentrates, and it's the problem isn't going to go away. It's very serious, and will continue to be very serious for tens of thousands of years, if not 100,000 or 200,000 years. And so far, it hasn't been fixed, and it appears that the technology to successfully, let's say, repair an exploded and melted down nuclear power plant probably does not exist, has not been developed. Now, the issue is that there are hundreds of these things, and as time goes on, most any of them are vulnerable to catastrophically fail with results similar to what has obtained so far in Chernobyl, and even with worse effect in Japan. So if we don't resolve the issue of these hundreds of nuclear power plants, their associated spent nuclear fuel pools, which must be perpetually cooled and filled with water from now for the coming geological age, um, then we're done for, because once these things melt down and or blow up, you can't get near them to fix it, even if you could, because the radioactivity is so lethal that when you send in young men in the prime of life, they just don't last.
Hmm.
At most, they can go in for a very short period of time, let's say minutes. If they stay longer, they'll literally be microwaved and they won't come out. You'll have to send a robot in there
Hmm.
to drag their carcass out. So these things are extremely complex machines. They're very deadly machines. They must perpetually be maintained 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, week after week, month after month, year after year. And if you don't do that, they fail. And if there's a natural disaster, such as the tsunami and earthquake in Japan, or anything else, or if there is a shooting nuclear war, let's say, as there could be. But if there is, and you have nuclear detonations near or at the site of nuclear power plants, the nuclear power plants clearly fail, compounding an already gravely serious situation in the form of a shooting nuclear war. Another issue is that even if nuclear detonations in a shooting nuclear war did not occur at or near nuclear power plants, they could occur at other places that would cause a national power grid, let's say the American power grid, to go down. If that happens, you will also have nuclear power plants that will fail, and in short order. In the United States, there's something like 100 of them.
Hmm.
That's one of the big reasons that nuclear war must not happen, because if it does, the ensuing radioactive hell will likely sterilize this planet of most every higher life form, including humanity. There would probably be some lichens and bacteria and viruses and low so-called simpler or lower life forms that would survive, but the biosphere that exists now on Earth would take a very heavy hit, and would be much of it would be wiped out.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Well, it sounds like Fukushima has done some serious damage. I don't think we can really repair much of what's gone on. And it seems to me that people aren't really keeping track insofar as the radiation levels are going.
No, people aren't keeping track, not only of Fukushima, but of a lot of other things.
Hmm.
And that's another reason why humanity is in such deep trouble, because such a large portion of the human race has abdicated its responsibility to be an informed, um, self realized, self activated, responsible, adult, mature human being. Sadly, so few humans fit that description, comparatively speaking,
Hmm.
that these problems we face, and the nuclear issue is just one of them. There are other grave issues that people simply aren't paying attention to them. I mean, I'm living in South America now for almost 5 years, and I couldn't say that the situation is any different here from what it is in the United States. People watch a lot of sports on television. I mean, a lot of professional sports, and they watch a lot of soap operas. They watch a lot of movies. That's pretty well what most people are doing in the United States right now. They're watching television if they haven't gone to bed yet. They're watching some kind of sporting program, or some kind of sitcom, or some movie that they've seen 58 times before, but Solaris, it's their favorite movie. So they're watching it for the 59th time
Hmm.
because it's so good. And And of course, they're drinking colas with that and eating popcorn and chips and candy and every kind of junk food there is, with the result that they're, many of them, obese, overweight, even grossly obese, out of shape. They're all crapped up with junk food. And
Hmm.
I couldn't say it's much different in South America. The point is that, you know, you are what you eat. And if you sit around watching television, as tens of millions of people do, even billions all around the world, I guess, and eating crap food, um, your your life is going to reflect the quality of your thought process
Hmm.
and the quality of the so-called food that you're taking in. And someone who's taking in a low quality diet with poor nutrition, deficient in essential uh, macro and micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, um, essential fatty acids, um, amino acids, I mean, essential oils and fats, protein, and so forth. If they're not getting that, then frankly, they're not going to think well. Your brain actually uses more oxygen than any organ in your body, and the reason it does is because nature designed your brain to be incredibly active. And if you don't give the brain the nutrients it needs to function well and efficiently, it will not function well and it won't function efficiently. And that's the condition a very large percentage of the human race is currently in. And so we have a huge uh, cohort, planetary cohort of hundreds of millions and billions of people who don't think clearly, who cannot think clearly
Hmm.
because their body is full of all of this junk and chemicalized crap.
I so agree with you. And also, well, besides the chemicals, and there's the let us not forget chemtrails and all the electromagnetic pollutants, and then again, remote types of brainwashing devices that are going down also. So there's a lot happening here. There's no doubt about it. But I agree. Input output. It's what you put into your body is what kind of output you're going to have.
Well, and people who are feeding themselves that way, if we could say that, will not be capable of focusing on these problems you just mentioned, analyzing them,
Hmm.
and devising a strategy, whether individually or in concert with others, for coming to terms with these assaults, not just in the liberty and freedom, but of their very biological existence itself. Um, I don't know if you've interviewed Dane Wigington, have you?
No, but I Russ Tanner I have, and he's really good with the chemtrails as well. I need to get Dane on. Yeah, phenomenal work.
Dane Wigington would come on your show.
Yeah.
You just need to contact him. His website is geoengineering.com or .org, I forget which. Anyway, if you want to look him up, um, he's done excellent work on all of these poisonous substances that are being dumped into the atmosphere in industrial quantities, much of it, not all of it, but a great deal of it, by the American military agencies for reasons which are not entirely known. Some of them are known, or at least can be feasibly guessed at with some accuracy, but the end result is that these programs are very damaging to the planet, to its climate systems, and to the biosphere.
Hmm.
Plant and animal life, the flora and fauna of this planet, are being ravaged by these substances that are being sprayed in huge quantities, just thousands and thousands of tons are being dispersed into the atmosphere uh, with all kinds of poisonous substances, including aluminum is one of the major ones, barium salts, etc. And these get into the environment, they fall out in the rain and the snow, they get taken up by plants, they get into the bodies of animals and fish and frogs and birds, and into our bodies as well, with very negative health consequences. They compromise our immune systems. And we actually find that this planet is being killed, Solaris. The planet is being killed. There's great malice of forethought behind this program. We see some of the things that are being done. On one hand, you have the nuclear onslaught, which is fully capable of exterminating um, most higher biological life on this planet in and of itself as the years and decades go by. And then you have the geoengineering with the so-called chemtrails. Then we have now biological engineering, a genetic engineering, if you will, with the modification of so many different organisms, both plant and animal. It's more and more common with each passing year that the very genetic code of the life forms on this planet are being altered, usually in not good ways. And then we have the issue of tremendous accumulation of toxic chemicals and substances in the environment due to the way that due to industrial factory farming on one hand, and then the processes of heavy industry on the other, which are spewing out millions of tons of contaminants into the air, land, and water every day. And then we have the issue of war. The actual military-industrial complex all over the planet, which is preeminently in the United States of America, but not only. There other countries also have their own military-industrial complexes, but the military-industrial complex is quite poisonous and toxic in every way you can think of, and we don't even know the half of it. What we do know is plenty bad. It's a major contributor to a whole suite of social, economic, ecological, and spiritual problems and political problems that exist on this planet. And then we could talk about the influence of mind control and all of its many aspects. We already touched on that from one point with regard to all of the chemicals in the food negatively affecting the human organism, including and notably the brain. If your food is full of chemical crap, it's going to harm your brain. And in fact, it does, and make it hard to think clearly, and maybe even cause brain cancer in some cases. And then we've already mentioned television, which is another means of mass programming the human population. And that's, well, what are they called? Television programs.
Right.
It's right in your face. Television programming. It's intended to program you. Women watching these telenovelas here in Latin America, or as they're called, soap operas in the United States and in Europe, which program so many women. Day after day, they watch hours of these dysfunctional relationships, dysfunctional families, with every manner of backstabbing and cheating and lying and even murder and worse. And I just described millions and millions and millions of women all over the world who spend a sizable chunk of their waking hours watching this stuff day after day. And there are many other examples. And of course, traditionally in human society, since the dawn of time, the female has been the nurturer of the family unit. This is just the way. Humans are just genetically set up this way. Women have this nurturing function, which has been given them by nature. It's just the way things are. And yet you have all of these women in recent decades, millions and millions of them all over the world, being programmed to be scheming, conniving, cold, calculating, backstabbing bitches. And you see the effect in society, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. No, I agree with you. I remember the old days, they used to have all those soap operas. I think you're touching base on those too. When I
Well,
was growing
that's what
up.
I'm talking
Yeah,
about. They're
because I never
still there.
watched those, but I remember that crap. And
Well,
I
they're
was like,
still on. No,
ugh,
they're still on television.
gosh.
They're
Yeah.
still on television in the United States. They certainly are in Latin America, and women watch them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a mind rot right there.
Well, it's terrible.
Hmm.
And then you have so many of the uh, video games that young boys, especially, not only but especially, young boys play nowadays. And here in South America, and you can see them in the internet arcades or cyber cafes. They call them cyber. It's not really a cafe, but you go and you pay a pretty modest amount of money, and you can use it. If you pay like 70 or 80 cents, you can go online for an hour at a time. Sometimes it's costs less than that, sometimes more. But even a young boy in a South American country can scrape together $1 to beg it from his mother or his father or whatever, or steal it. And what they do is these young kids, 7, 8, 6, 9, 10 years old, they'll sit in these places for hours playing the most violent video games. Blam, blam, boom, 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 blam, blam. The object is to kill as many of whoever the enemy is as possible. Now, the young boys in the United States are doing the same thing. They sit around for hours, day after day, and they play violent video games. Well, this is also very dysfunctional social programming, very violently dysfunctional programming. And what a shock that so many young boys and young men commit violent crimes after having spent years of playing these violent video games. They then act out in one way or another
Hmm.
in everyday life and commit violent crimes. And this is true in Latin America. There's certainly violent street crime, and there's certainly violent crime in the United States. And I don't think it's any accident that it's the the majority of the violent crime is committed by young men and teenagers, and so many of them have grown up playing these very violent video games.
Hmm.
You know what if 50 Cent's um, famous line was, "Get rich quick or die trying," and the poster for that movie had a picture of him with a pistol stuck in his waistband,
Hmm.
and back. And so many of these young kids, not just black kids, but kids of other ethnicities and races as well, now think it's cool to be a gangster and indulge in gunplay and live on the wild side, if you will, and push the edges of the social envelope with oftentimes unpleasant consequences.
Hmm.
So we can see all of this going on. And then the movies. Here in South America, it's quite common on the buses. Bus usage is very heavy in Latin America. People ride the buses. They cost just a few dollars to ride, from one city to another. Most people don't have cars, and it's expensive to fly, so people ride the buses. And they show movies on the buses. There are flat panel screens on the buses, sometimes two, one in the front and then one mid bus. And they show movies. Just pop in the CDs and show movies. And a lot of these movies come out of Hollywood. They're not necessarily the expensive feature films, though sometimes they are. Oftentimes they're not even grade B movies. They're like, grade C or grade D. But they're so violent, is the point I'm trying to make.
Hmm.
So much of this violence that Hollywood is spewing out on the world, and people watch these movies, and all of these violent scenarios get imprinted in the subconscious and leads to a gradual, or not really so gradual, a degradation of society in the way that people treat each other and what they accept as acceptable normative social behavior. I think this has a lot to do with the rise in street crime in recent decades all over the world.
Mm.
When I was a kid, I'm 60 years old, but when I was a kid, in most cities in the United States and even a lot of cities in other parts of the world, you could go out and walk the streets and you didn't have to worry about street crime. But somewhere starting, in the 1970s and coming forward, you began to hear more and more about street crime, and it's certainly with us today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly is. That's negative entrainment is what you're talking about. And
Exactly.
yeah, totally. I agree with you on that one. It's escalated in such a toxic fashion. It's really kind of sad to watch this because, I'd like to see things ascend on a higher level of consciousness for everybody, but it doesn't seem like we're going in that direction.
We are not. And this has been a collective decision on the part of humanity to turn
Mm-hmm.
in this negative, violent direction. At the same time, there's tremendous poverty on this planet. There are more people living in deep poverty than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
The propaganda you see in the mainstream news media about how there's more bounty than ever before, and that fewer people are living in poverty than ever before. These are simply lies. It's absolutely not true. The data reveal that the vast majority of humanity are living in poverty, and fully half of humanity, fully 50% of the human race, is living in grinding poverty. I mean hand to mouth. I'm talking about living on $2 or $3 a day, and that's fully half of the human race. Do you know it's really hard to live on $2 or $3 a day, no matter where in the world you live?
Mm-hmm.
And you might say that it's so hard that it's difficult to imagine how you could do that and keep from dying. And in fact, a lot of people are dying. They are slowly dying or dying more rapidly. But when you're living on such a low economic level, there is no extra. I mean, there's not even enough for the essentials, which are a couple thousand calories and minimally about 50 grams of protein a day. And if you don't get that, an adult human being doesn't get that, you're out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm describing hundreds of millions of people
Right.
who aren't getting that. They're not even getting, a pound of rice and half a pound of lentil beans a day, and that costs what? A couple of bucks, if that. And they don't have those $2.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reality on this planet, just grinding poverty more and more as the wealth is concentrated, the wealth of the earth is concentrated into fewer and fewer hands.
Mm-hmm.
More and more people have less and less. Fewer and fewer people have more and more. And this has brought humanity to the brink of a crisis without equal. We've never been in this situation. Either we resolve the grave, dire straits in which we find ourselves, or we don't. And if we don't resolve them, I don't see the human race making it out of this century as a viable species on this planet, and maybe not even past 2050.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think that was the agenda, behind it with these cabals, is that they want a eugenics program. I mean, they want to take out a majority of people on this planet. And, I don't think anybody should be without food, shelter, or water. I mean, that should be a natural given for everybody on the planet. But I agree with you. We need to resolve these issues. And yet I see this dark tide rising where it seems to me like they really are pushing to annihilate people.
Well, Solaris, there is the planet is well capable of providing every human being on the planet with a couple thousand calories of nutritious food a day, with 50 or 60 grams of protein, and at a minimum, that the planet is easily productive enough to do that. We shouldn't have people, reed thin, starving to death in the gutters of cities and small towns all over the world. It just shouldn't even happen, and yet it is. Uh, there is the situation is so dire that in the coming months and years, and I'm not talking about the far future. I just mentioned 2050, which is 35 years away. And I'm not talking even about 2050. I'm talking about these last months of 2015 and 2016, 2017. The things that we do right now will determine whether humanity survives. We are up against it right now. We don't have the luxury of any more time to sit around in think tanks and, game plan, well, what's going to be the big picture in 2050? We're past that stage. And if we don't take immediate, intelligent, productive, creative, compassionate, environmentally, not just benign, but benevolent, planet-wide action right now, to do not going to suffice.
I agree. No, we need to resolve this. What is your suggestion? I mean, what do you see as a solution or a possible solution for people?
The only thing is to raise the mass consciousness to a much higher level. Absent that, you can pass whatever law you want. You can impose whatever economic measures you like. But if the great bulk of humanity remains willfully, we're done for. The only thing that will help is to raise the level of consciousness and awareness spiritually and also intellectually. Absent that, we're a failed species. And that also goes for the so-called ruling elite, the majority of whom are frankly stupid. They're also ignorant and stupid and spiritually retarded, or else they wouldn't behave as they do. Now, on a dying planet, I'm sorry, they're also going to die. And they don't have it together enough mentally and spiritually to understand that if everyone else dies, they will too. If the whole food chain breaks down, they also eat food. They also must drink water. They also must breathe air. So if the planetary environment, global environment, is so toxic that there's a mass die-off of the human race, they too will partake of the mass die-off, because the last time I checked, they're all air breathers. And if we don't raise our consciousness, our awareness, intellectually and spiritually, then it doesn't matter what kind of policies are set in place. The raising the consciousness means that humanity en masse must recognize that it cannot violate the biosphere on this planet without consequences. And that the worse that humanity violates the biosphere, the worse the consequences will be. And if the biosphere is killed or sterilized, humanity also will be killed and or sterilized. And in fact, speaking of sterilization, do you know that the viable sperm count of males in countries all over the planet is rapidly dropping?
No
because, because it's still the way to procreate. I know there are various kinds of laboratory techniques that have been developed over the last 20 or 30 years, but the Congress of Men and Women is still a very popular way of producing babies. And I'm sure there are many people doing that as we speak all over the world. The issue is that as men become less and less fertile, that it's harder and harder to produce babies. And if men's fertility falls below a certain point, and we're headed there,
Hmm.
then the human race could effectively just go sterile. I mean, if either most men become sterile or most women, that effectively leads to a huge drop off in procreation and therefore a sharp drop in numbers of humans. And if that's happening, as it appears it is, because of chemical contamination of the environment, then that's an issue because the toxic chemical load in the environment continues to accumulate dramatically with each passing year. There's more and more and more. And it's negatively compromising not only the environment, but humanity itself. And this can't go on. And because it can't go on, it won't. So we either resolve these problems, and there are others we haven't even touched on, or we don't. If we don't survive. And so unless we, as a species, as a great mass of several billions of very active, not very intelligent bipedal primates on this planet, unless we grok and really take to heart that we are an integral part of this planet and what we do impacts the planet greatly to the extent that if we get it wrong, guess what? We kill ourselves along with the planet if we can't wrap our minds and hearts around that as a global species. Then do we even deserve to continue on?
I so agree. What comes to mind also is this terraforming the planet or a hybridization or a new species that they're trying to create, and transhumanism and cloning along the lines of, what you're saying is almost like they're trying to create an opposite effect. What's your take on all that?
Well, I don't like Ray Kurzweil's philosophy whatsoever. He's the technical director at Google. A lot of people don't know this, but he's their chief research scientist, if you will. And he's the chief apostle of the transhumanism movement, which I think it would be fair to say that he worships the prospect of merging humanity with artificial intelligence and actually downloading his brain into a vast supercomputer and subsuming his humanity into an artificial construct. Thereby, he presumes to become a transhuman, and that's offensive on so many levels. The machine technology is derivative of is not transcendent.
Correct.
Of human intelligence. It is derivative of human intelligence. So why would a human presume to debase himself and put himself into a subordinate role to a machine that he has created? To me, that is abusive at a fundamental level and a rejection of the Creator at an even more fundamental level. Telling the Creator that I reject at a basic level my own humanity, which is a gift, hyperdimensional gift actually, which is not well understood by most human beings, and that I subordinate that to this machine that I have made and join myself to this machine rather than joining myself to the hyperdimensional divine realms of reality. To me, that is diabolical. I perceive that as demonic. And this gets around to some of the things ayahuasca has shown me. I believe we discussed this previously earlier this year in another conversation, but I, like many other people, unknown thousands, maybe millions, have drunk ayahuasca. And at this point, I've drunk a fair amount of it. I'd like to drink more. It's very hard to drink because it has an extremely disagreeable taste, which is almost impossible to bear, which is why most people vomit when they drink it, and I frequently have myself. It's very hard to drink and to keep down without vomiting. Very hard. And what it does, on the other hand, is show you all kinds of things. The the plants in the jungle, and plants actually all over the planet, are aware and awake. Some of them are hyperconscious, maybe all of them for all I know. But certainly the plants that go into the so-called ayahuasca brew are hyperconscious, and they interact with the human mind in a modem-like fashion, so to speak, plugging you in and your awareness into, or opening your awareness into a more expansive realm of knowledge and consciousness. I haven't found any end so far to that. Every time you drink ayahuasca is different. It's not easy or possible to predict what it may show you or reveal to you. If anything, sometimes it doesn't, but quite frequently it does. There may be visions. Uh, there may be downloads of just instantly available telepathic knowledge that comes to you with 100% certainty. There may be certain insights you have into your own personality or life. There may be behavioral changes that result from drinking ayahuasca. You may find that your way of thinking is changed, in most cases for the better, and on and on. It's an unusual dialogue between the plant awareness and the human awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that ayahuasca showed me from the very beginning, because I asked ayahuasca to show me what it felt was most important for me to know. What it showed me was not what I was expecting. It has revealed to me in a number of different ways over a period of time something that I have come to call the machine, which is, as I perceived it, an artificial construct. I don't know where it comes from or how it was constructed or by whom or by what it was constructed and when. But I can describe it to you. It is calculating. It is cunning, and I mean massively calculating and cunning. It is subtle. It is powerful. It is insidious. It is malevolent. It is sly. It is stealthy. It is Machiavellian, and it is bent. It is relentless. It's ruthless. It's merciless. It is bent on taking down this planet and the human race from everything I can see.
Hmm.
It has insinuated itself into virtually every person on this planet, into every aspect of human society and culture on this planet. Once you are alerted to its presence and its modus operandi, its method of acting on this planet, you can see its tentacles everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
In the nuclear complex, certainly. In genetic engineering. And the humanism movement of Ray Kurzweil. In this great rush to robotize everything, robots and androids. You hear about this more and more everywhere.
Correct.
You hear about, you can see it in the mindless programming on television. You can see it in the massively dysfunctional economic system, which is just destroying people's lives and grinding people down to nothing by the hundreds of millions and billions. You can see it in the Fortune 500. You can see it in the preparations for nuclear war. And you can see it in the chemicalized food. You can see it in the chemtrail geoengineering program that Dan Wigington and others talk about. You can see it in all of these things and more.
Mm-hmm.
And the machine understands humanity very well. It understands what people want. And you know what? It's not natural to make nuclear missiles. It's not natural to tamper with the genetic code of the biosphere and so forth. But if you give people gaudy baubles, it turns out an awful lot of people will do those things. If you give them a brass nameplate and an office with a secretary, or you give them a company car, or you give them an expense account, or if you give them expensive prostitutes, what do they want? Do they want women? Do they want men? Do they want boys? Do they want little children? You see, I'm describing the world as it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Do they want political power? Do they want to lord it over other people? Do they want to kill? There are organizations where you can go in and you can kill, and you can kill a lot of people, and you're paid to do it, and you achieve social status and professional rank. This could be an organized criminal syndicate. It could be a military agency, etc. Or, do you know there are a lot of doctors that kill people?
Mm-hmm.
But they do it under cover of a white medical coat. And they have, they're shielded from prosecution.
Right.
It happens every day, every day. What I'm telling you is, and some people want money. Some people just want money, lots of money. Some people want a fast car. There's some people, if they just get that vintage Corvette Stingray or Maserati or whatever, that's the cat's meowing, and they're just over the moon. Some people, if they just get a ski chalet in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or in Switzerland, or a nice beachside villa on a Caribbean island, the machine gives people what they want, and in return, the machine requires their soul.
Right. And Richard, with that being said, we're gonna have a break. We'll be right back. Everybody stay tuned. Richard Sauder, Ravenstar's Witching Hour.